Do not adjust your digital device. What you are about to see and hear may shock and appall you. Join our hosts as they encounter countless thrills, spills, chills, and hilarity as they explore the very weirdest in pop culture. The following media is so strange, so beyond the scope of what is normal, it will make you ask the question, why does this exist? Hello, everybody, and welcome to an episode of Why Does This Exist? I'm Chris.
And I'm Rob.
And today we've got a pretty decent show. We're going to be talking about some really crazy music from, well,
A really
Chicago,
crazy man.
Chicago, and they just live wherever they live now. They're giving hopium to the masses. They are going to be touring with Rob Zombie and Alice Cooper this Halloween season, or fall season rather, and it's going to be some crazy, interesting stuff. Lots of drugs are involved in this, lots of double entendres, and also the birth of industrial metal, really. Or at least they're credited with the early industrial metal. We're talking about Ministry today, and what a silly, silly, silly man Al Jurgensen is.
Yeah.
But before we do that, let's just run over our very, very, very quick and painful spiel with you. We are Why Does This Exist? We are a podcast that talks about the very weirdest in pop culture, the weirdest there is, the weirdest there ever was, the weirdest there ever will be, and things like that. Now, you can support the show in a number of ways. All the links are at the bottom. The best way is Patreon. You give us money, we let you into the Discord server, then you can be our friend or come on the show or whatever the hell you want. I don't really care. You can also buy us coffee, so you go to buymeacoffee.com/why does this exist. You leave us alone, and you give us money, and then we never talk to each other ever again. Maybe you give us your mom's credit card number and you pay us like $500,000 and then you just walk away. I'm not saying you should do that, but perhaps. I'm not responsible for anything that you do. Neither is Rob. You can't sue us, so suck it. You can also support us on Spreaker, where you can give us money there, and you can follow us on the social channels and our YouTube channel. Just like, comment, subscribe, and all that stuff. We want to get to 50. Help us get to 50 people and give us money. Okay? Are we all good? Comprende? Is that it? Good.
Yeah.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge from a ragtag group of rogues. So let's get on with the goddamn show. Tell the good people about Ministry.
Oh, all right. Ministry is a really interesting band because I think they have the biggest sound shift of any band in history from their first couple of albums to their later albums. Because in the 80s, Ministry started out as like a synth pop kind of band, almost like, I guess, like Depeche Mode or, Gary Newman and, that kind of like new wave, kind of like synthy, poppy, but like dark kind of sounding music. And then, of course, in the 90s, they became, as you said before, one of the first industrial metal bands. And the
They're
sound
often
contrast.
credited as they're often credited as the pioneers or like godfathers, founders of industrial metal.
Yeah.
I don't know how true that is, but
And influence also.
it's up for debate as to like whether or not they were first. But they
Yeah.
are definitely one of the first.
And inspired like many of the industrial acts that came later on.
Oh, yeah.
And have been like largely credited as by multiple big industrial acts as being an influence. But yeah, their humble beginnings, and there's been various like interviews with Al Jurgensen, and he's like changed his story over time, saying that like first like that like he had like no creative control on the first couple of records, and that's why they sounded the way they sounded. Um, but he's also said that like he just like changed the way what he wanted to do and just didn't want to like start a new band, so he just kept Ministry name and just and like did what he wanted to do.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
it's up
he
for debate on why like there was such a stark change in sound.
right. I
Um,
mean, there's a lot of there's been a lot of lineup changes. I'm pretty
yes,
sure that Al Jurgensen is probably the only member who's still been there from the beginning.
yeah, I believe Al Jurgensen is really the only
Yeah,
consistent
he
member.
is. He
I
is.
it's like Al Jurgensen is to Ministry what Dave Mustaine is to Megadeth. Like, it's really his band, and everyone else that came after or like, around like whatever album they came on, it was really just like they were kind of like, I don't want to say glorified session musicians, but they didn't have like as much of a stake in the band as Al Jurgensen did.
Yeah, and I
Um,
mean, he's had a ton of like session touring musicians anyway that have been on there.
yeah.
Um, like a lot of like really big drummers too. Like a lot of like really big drummers and like just really big like
Oh, yeah. Joey
musicians that have
Jordison
been
has
on and off. You Tony Campo, Tommy Victor, Paul Barker. You've got Burton C. Bell. There's been a
Mhm.
ton of people who've just come and gone from this band that are all
Yep.
like really great musicians in their own right.
Yeah.
Jimmy DeGrasso, former Megadeth,
Mike
has been in the
Scotcha.
band. Yeah, Mike Scosher, rest in peace. You've had, he's just had a lot of great friggin' musicians that have been on there. But yeah, if you've ever seen Ministry, you're always kind of like, there's all these like, moderately like young looking guys, and there's this like old man who's like in the
Yeah.
front, and it's Al Jurgensen like doing his thing. Um, but also Al Jurgensen is just he's a wild guy who had a big heroin problem, and
Yeah.
maybe he can't quite remember certain things, so like that could be why the story's changed. But
Maybe.
also he he's for a long time he's expressed interest in redoing the first few Ministry albums, so there could be some truth to it. Like maybe he felt that he didn't have enough creative control, or the music that he was doing in the early days of Ministry was not really the music that he wanted to do,
Yeah.
and it kind of evolved into what he wanted over time. I could see that happening.
Yeah. That's possible. I don't know. It's really hard to say because again, like Al Jurgensen's the one that tells the story, and he's told it different several times.
Right.
Um, so it's really hard to say for sure what the actual story is. Um, but I mean it's definitely a very stark transition.
Oh
If
yeah.
if you listen to their '80s stuff compared to their '90s stuff, and anything after the '90s. And I think Al Jurgens said himself. I was watching an interview with him, and he was basically like, every Ministry record sounds different, and he's like proud of that fact. Like he was always like,
I mean, it is a cool little fun fact because most bands tend to keep a lot of the sameness
yeah,
throughout the entire careers, and that's not a knock on them. That's just the artist's style,
yeah,
where Ministry is constantly evolving.
yeah. Well, and yeah, and it's perfect because there's been bands obviously before that have changed genres, especially in the '90s. A lot of the '80s metal bands became more grungy in the '90s just because that was like the trend in music at the time in hard rock.
Right.
And but you could still tell it was the band. Like when Metallica released Load and Reload, you still knew it was Metallica. Yeah, it sounded way different than Kill 'Em All and Master of Puppets, but they still had that Metallica sound. For Ministry, it's like almost like, besides the fact that it's still Al Jurgensen singing, almost every album sounds different. It's like it's almost like it could be a completely different band, and in many cases was, because there were so many
Hmm.
lineup shifts in Ministry.
Well, and musical style shifts too,
Yeah,
and plus, I don't know who's behind the mixing board or the decisions that are being made, but like there's some that heavily feature more instruments, like different instruments over others.
Right.
Like a lot of the early stuff, you'll hear a lot more of the synth stuff, and
Yeah.
then you'll hear more sampling in the later years over things. Um, and even though, and like some of the later albums will be either more guitar heavy
Yeah.
or they'll be more keyboard heavy, and it really depends on what you're getting at. Like a lot of the anti George Bush stuff is really all over the place, but it's great for that reason
Yeah.
because like it's almost like Ministry has become the musical embodiment of chaos,
Yeah. And I'm
which
sure
is
Al Jurgensen
awesome.
wants it that way.
Yes,
He's kind of a
I've
chaotic guy.
yes, I actually spoke with him. I interviewed him about 10 years ago, a little after Mike Scotcha had passed, when he did the Buck Satan album, and and there was and a Ministry album that he had done at the time. I think it was, or he had been recovering and like talking about leaving.
It could have been Relapse
Um,
or From Beer to Eternity.
I think it was.
Those both came out around the time that I think Relapse Scotcha actually did play on, and it was released posthumously.
That's
But
the one then.
yeah,
Yeah, that's the one. It was either going to be Relapse or From Beer to Eternity when we were talking about it, because he did the Buck Satan album
oh no
with.
no, From Beer to Eternity he appeared posthumously. Scott Relapse was released during his lifetime, Mike Scotcha's lifetime.
Okay, so then it may have been Relapse, and then at that point, a little after he did the Buck Satan album,
Uh huh.
that's when Scotcha passed away. Because we were talking about him a little bit, and I think he had only been gone less than 6 months at the time. But I was talking with him, and we were talking about like the Lard stuff, and he was just like super on board to do another Lard album at some point, and that would be great. But yeah, he talked about all kinds of crazy stuff. He talked about heroin, and then he got into government conspiracies, and then like there were just, and we talked about his book Fixed a little bit. Um, I believe, or I think at the time I asked him if he would do a book, and he hadn't written it. I'm sorry. His book came out in what year? Fixed. Let me just check this really quick. Uh, no, not.
Trying to see, it doesn't say on Wikipedia when he wrote it.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the damn thing because it keeps bringing up the Lost Gospels, which is not the book that I'm looking for, unless unless now for some weird reason we live in the Mandela effect time, and that book no longer exists and I made
Possible.
everything up. It is possible. Well, anyway, we were talking about his life, and we were talking about all these crazy times in ministry, and he was just saying how like he just did so much heroin that he's so surprised that he's alive. And I was listening
Yeah.
to like this interview that he did with Bill Burr where he was like also talking about how like for how like his skin looks great now because like because he like managed to survive heroin,
Yeah,
which I don't know. He's like, this is the fountain of youth. You got to start young and not die.
I guess so.
So, but we are not giving that as advice. Anyone listening, by the way, we are
Yeah,
also not responsible. Please don't do heroin. And if you live in Amsterdam where it's legal, then if you are going to do that, do it responsibly. But if you do it in a place where it's illegal, you better quit it now. Yeah. So that's our PSA on heroin.
yeah.
And now we're canceled. Okay then.
We've
But
been canceled since the day we were born.
yes, but starting with, but yeah, Al Jurgensen. very interesting guy to speak
Yeah,
with. He's
yeah,
he's a well-spoken, smart guy, but he's well, he's a little batty. I'll tell you
yeah.
that. He is very, very politically left, but also he kind of like he he's anti-government, but he's also very left-leaning, and and a lot of that really came out during like the whole COVID thing. He was
Yeah.
very like pro-vaccine, almost in an unhealthy. Some would say in an unhealthy way, to where like Howard Stern is now, where Howard Stern is like basically afraid of it, and other people are a little bit confused as to like, is he like turning on his own beliefs or has he become a hypocrite? There are some fans who, if you read YouTube comments or anything,
Yeah.
during like an Al Jurgensen interview, like they're always kind of like, what, like he kind of went 180 on this thing because like, did COVID scare this guy or like what? Is
I
kind of
think I
weird.
think
But
COVID broke a lot of fucking people. That's
oh yeah, it certainly did. I mean, you walk around now and there's a lot of people who are just who are still wearing masks all the time when they go outside or
yeah.
even in their car, where it's just you driving the car, but you know, there's just nothing that you could do. They're like
No, these are
they're
the people that won't ever listen to reason. They've like literally like they're so afraid that like they can't comprehend, and that's what fear does to people. It
oh
changes them,
yeah. Yeah.
like completely. And uh,
I feel
you know,
bad for these people,
I'm
but
someone who works in a hospital, and I can tell you that the COVID numbers were like like not bad at all this past like winter. Like the only people that were really hospitalized from it were like people that were already very old or had some kind of other pre-existing sickness. Like it's been very mild, and it's really, I don't want to say it's not a threat anymore because people, obviously like certain people should avoid it because if they have any kind of immune compromised issues or are very elderly, like yeah, it could affect you still. But for the general population, it's really not a threat anymore.
mhm.
Anyway, I don't want to get into COVID bullshit, but yeah,
No.
like it just like it really did. Certain people are like just like completely like went off the rails with it, and have not recovered mentally from the pandemic. And I guess Al Jurgensen's one of them. And like even before, like I've never really been much of a fan of Al Jurgensen personally, just because like I think his politics are a little stupid and like I want to say short sighted, like or not like non nuanced. I want to say like he just like picks a side kind of thing,
Mhm.
and which is fine, I guess, because that's what most people do. But like I don't know. Al Jurgensen's one of those people where like I really have to like separate the art from the artist because I'm not like a huge fan of Al Jurgensen personally, but I really like Ministry's music. It's like really good, and it's like right up my alley for the type of music that I like.
Right, and
Uh,
I think in some cases that's like that's really the best way, the best way that you can go about it. You don't
yeah,
have, depending on what the who the person is and what they've done, you can like, it's fine if you like, you don't like them, but you like whatever art that they create, depending on what they do. If it's, well, whatever examples you can come up with of someone to not do that with,
yeah.
then that's the answer. We're not trying to split people or get polarizing or political here.
No,
we're
no,
trying to
no.
have a we're trying to have a good time, and trying to educate you people. We're trying to give hopium to the masses, which that's the last album that came out. It came out this year. It's pretty interesting, but they want when he talks about what he wants to do with the band, he keeps going back and forth on like retiring. Because sometimes it sounds like Al Jurgensen just wants he just wants the band to end,
Yeah,
and then other times he gets inspired to do more albums. I mean, that's but that's a creative person for you.
yeah.
It's like you never really know when they're done,
No,
and neither do they.
yeah. and I think Ministry is really the perfect example of that because they've had so many stylistic changes over the years that it kind of you know I think that the fact that he could still like find inspiration is pretty impressive. But I guess that lends credence to like all the like changes and stuff. That's why like Al Jurgensen might get like bored with like one kind of sound and go to something else, and that's like kind of his creative process, I guess, and that's why every Ministry record really does sound different.
Right. And I mean also he has so many spin-offs and side projects. So
Oh
like
my
he has
god,
the
yeah,
Revolt, there's the Revolting Cox, there's Lard, which I love. That's my favorite project that he's ever done
yeah,
is Lard with Jello Biafra.
yeah,
Um, A Thousand Homo DJs, PTP, Acid Horse, Paul Palehead, Pigface, and of course Buck Satan and the 666 Shooters,
yep,
which was the project with Mike Scotia that we spoke about.
yes,
Which I've met a few people who knew Mike Scotia or like saw Mike Scotia. Like I used to talk to Bruce Corbett every once in a while because we did a couple of interviews together too, and he was a really nice guy. I never
yeah,
got to meet him though. And our friend Ben from the Antichrist and the other guys who were in his old band Incinerator, they um they had like either played with rigor mortis or had like hung out with them or just like had spoken to them or hung out with them here and there.
yeah,
They knew him a little bit. And also when I was working at a Sam Ash, we went on this trip to Atlantic City that was like all paid for by Yamaha. They put us up in a really nice hotel room. And it was just really to like demo and like show us all their products and stuff and like networking. Nice people. I
yeah,
wish I had kept in touch with those folks. Um, but a few of them used to work at Gibson, and one of them was working at Gibson when they did the one day Ozfest in Dallas,
hmm,
and Rigor Mortis got to play. And one of them, and because it was so last minute, Rigor Mortis didn't really have a guitar tech because they were just playing a lot of like bigger local shows for the most part, and they had their regular jobs, I guess. And this particular guy, his name was Chris, and he interesting with him because he was studying to be a neurosurgeon, and then I think he was getting his like master's or doctorate, and he just was like so burnt out that he somehow got like mixed up into the music industry.
yeah,
And like just being like working for like Gibson for like R&D and stuff or like whatever it was that they did or like sales reps or something. I know those are two different things, but he did something for Gibson at the time. And he went down there and he was rigor mortis's guitar tech for the day. And I asked him about, and we were talking about Mike Scotch, and he was like, "You could not see the man's hands." He's like, he was the fastest guy I ever saw
yeah,
play guitar. He ran his fingers moved so fast up and down the fretboard that it didn't look like he did anything.
yeah,
So it's a shame that he passed away,
yeah.
but he was he was a great freaking guitar player.
Yeah, I Rigor Mortis is a great band, and we always used to hear our friend Nick, our friend Nick, Japan Nick. Shout out to him wherever he is. Um, he Rigor Mortis was his favorite band, and he would
Hmm.
he had interviewed Mike Scotcha, I believe, and also Bruce Corbett before both of them died. And had always talked very highly of them, and by extension, talked about Ministry a lot because Mike Scotcha was a big part of Ministry for many years,
Yeah,
and that could be because in the late '80s, Al Jurgensen ended up moving to Texas, and I think that's when he met Mike Scotcha while he was when he first moved to Texas and asked him to be a part of Ministry, and
yeah,
Al Jurgensen actually, always really kind of wanted to be like in a punk or a metal band. his growing up, his musical taste was very much influenced by like rock and early metal like Hawkwind and stuff like that. And you know, he allegedly, after seeing the Ramones on stage in Denver, Colorado, is when he decided he wanted to be a punk musician. So despite the fact that he started off with that electro pop kind of style, he always really wanted to go in that direction. Um, and I think that's probably why he also did Lard as well, because he got a chance to team up with Jello Biafra, of course, of the one of the biggest names in punk, being the vocalist of the Dead Kennedys. Um, so I think that was also like a big part of his what he uh, comes from that place of wanting to do like punk and metal from growing up.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense because if you see his attitude when he goes on stage, like he's this man is clearly a punk rocker
Yeah.
who's like just
No,
running around
absolutely.
doing crazy stuff and just having the time of his life.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's a really neat and wild guy. And
It, it
he
it's
wound up in the
interesting.
he wound up in the ministry wound up in the film and like Jurgensen, he like popped up. This is just like an interesting fact. Like he's in the film AI Artificial Intelligence
Yes.
because Stanley Kubrick, the director, who I didn't even realize that he directed that movie. It was like one of his last movies.
Yeah.
It might have been the one before his last one.
I think it was, yeah, because the
I think
last
it
one
was
was,
the
of
one
course,
was
Eyes Wide Shut,
Eyes Wide Shut.
which I think we had talked about at one point when we did a Truth or Whacked.
Yes, we did. We haven't done one of those in a very long time, by the
No, we
way.
haven't.
But he, yeah, he got in the movie because Stanley Kubrick wanted him there for some weird reason.
Well, and the story behind that's pretty hilarious because originally Kubrick had his secretary call Al to set up the meeting and all that, and Al Jorgensen thought it was like a prank call and just hung up on the person.
I
Um,
probably would have done the same thing.
exactly. I was like, he was like, "Are you like, what are you fucking like pulling my leg?" Like, so just like fucking hung up. Like, what, you want me to be in a freaking Stanley Kubrick wants to meet me, he wants me to be in his movie. Like, are you like crazy? Like, and I think
Yeah,
eventually, like Stanley Kubrick himself actually called. It was like, no, this is real. Like, I want you to be in the movie, and I want to use your music for the movie, which is like
oh yeah,
hilarious.
yeah. No, I would have done the same thing. I would have been like, I would have been like, what do you think? I'm stupid? Like, and just
Yeah,
hung up. Um, but yeah, just weird stuff. He also has like a project with Arabian Prince, who I don't think that we've done an episode on the NWA just yet.
not yet.
But Arabian Prince is one of the original members of NWA that
Yeah,
was like he he appeared on the album on the first album briefly, but he wasn't really like he was kind of on his way out of the band at that point.
yeah,
So just kind of interesting how like he ends up how like Al Jurgensen of all people is like working with him on stuff. But you know
yeah.
what? If it's working, it's working. I could see Arabian Prince being like one of the guys who like helps him like choose the crazy samples.
Well, I feel like Ministry especially is conducive to like stuff like that, like having like uh like crazy collaborations that wouldn't normally work. You know, uh, similarly to uh when System of a Down did that song for the for the Wu-Tang Clan tribute album, you
Yeah,
know, when they did Shame and actually had members of Wu-Tang Clan, do it with them.
yeah. But I could see
But
stuff like I could see him doing all kinds of stuff like that. I mean,
yeah,
I was telling the missus the other day, like just about ministry, and she like had me put some of them on, and she like some of it she was like, I think I kind of like this a little bit, but and then like there were like the more recent stuff. She was like, I don't know if this is for me, but like
yeah,
some of the earlier stuff, she was like, this isn't that bad. So like it was kind of like it's just kind of interesting. I was like, yeah, it's this weird messed up something for everyone,
yeah,
but like Yeah, Ministry, you'll see a lot of like the goth crowd like being really into Ministry and stuff like that,
Yeah.
which that just adheres to like the industrial music in general. You'll see a lot of goth folks or just
Well,
like
De-
people who
Depe-
go people who go to raves really.
Depeche Mode is also like a big like goth band, and again, like it's one of those
Yeah.
bands. It's like you would never like you would never like associate them necessarily with the gothic subculture, but like it's they're just, but they are kind of like dark. It's almost like there's like this like late 80s, like mid to late 80s aesthetic of like synth bands that were like doing like darker lyrics, there
Yep.
was like a lot of different, like, you had like the Smiths, Morrissey, and of course Depeche Mode and Susie and the Banshees, and like all these different like bands that were doing this kind of like, which was like kind of like the first, I don't want to say it's the first wave of goth, because goths were kind of around before that, but that was like the first wave of like specifically tailored to goth music, I feel like. Um Unless, you count like heavy metal, which you can, but like this is like, I feel like more of a different aesthetic. And then, going into the 90s, of course, you had Ministry and you had bands like uh Typo Negative, that kind of continued that. And I've always been like a big fan of like industrial and stuff. Like I really always liked Ramstein and V&V Nation and like bands like that. So like, Ministry really kind of like does it for me too, because it's like, I like that style of music. Um
Yeah.
so
The later
it
like I prefer the later Ministry stuff just because for probably similar reasons that it's just faster.
Yeah.
And also his vocal style has changed a lot over the years too, where now it is a lot
Yes.
more like it's a lot more like straightforward metal,
Yeah.
where where he would like distort his voice a whole lot in like the other times. But I mean that's kind of the best part about Ministry is that they're always evolving into like this whole different thing. Like it's not even it's like it's just constantly shedding its skin and it's like getting into a cocoon and then it's like it's breaking out and becoming this new thing, but it's
Yeah.
definitely not a butterfly. It's at best it's a death head's moth, but
Well, and even like Al Jurgensen's look has changed drastically over the years. Like if you look at
yes,
like
yes it has.
what he looked like in the 80s, he had like short hair, was very clean cut, no tattoos, no piercings, and like, now you look at him now, he's got like full dreadlocks, like tattoos on his face. Like
Yeah.
apparently he's gotten rid of his piercings, but he used to have like a ridiculous amount of piercings in his face.
How do you sleep with that? Because they were like spiky too.
Yeah, I know. But
Uh,
yeah, so like it's very interesting the way he's changed. But I think kind of like he kind of evolved with like the goth aesthetic too, because like you had like the more traditional looking goths in the 80s, and then like the 90s and the early 2000s you got like more of that mall goth look with like, baggy clothes with like chains and like zippers and all kinds of stuff on it, and then like having dreadlocks and piercings and tattoos and all that. So, he kind of evolved with the whole goth subculture almost.
yeah, kind of. It's just so crazy that like, well, how many albums do they have? They have I mean, Al has
Right, Al has a
God
ridiculous amount of
knows.
albums. If you just count the Ministry albums, there's like, let's see, 1, 2,
There's at
3,
least
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 Ministry albums.
my God.
Revolting Cox has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 albums.
Yeah,
So
Lard
like
has 4. He's
thir-
got, like
30 albums just between two bands, and he's got like 10 different bands
Jesus
that he's done
Christ.
over the years.
Yeah, I mean, God, I would love to have that many.
And not to mention that also, like, all the like special release, the special uh appearances and stuff he's done. He's appeared on like Cold Chamber albums, Static X,
Oh,
Reverend
yeah.
Horton Heat, like a bunch of different albums. So like, he's very, very prolific. One of the most prolific musicians in like I would say in like rock and heavy metal, I would say just for the, you know, being like a singer and multi-instrumentalist, because usually like, you'll see drummers that are in like a dozen different bands, like Gene Hoglan's a perfect example. He's been
Oh
in like
yeah.
every major metal band under the sun pretty much. Um but like you don't often see like lead singers that are like in so many different bands or like make appearances on so many different albums like Al Jurgensen has.
No, it's almost maniacal, but it's like this is the thing that's been keeping him going this whole time. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing else because he's like he's he's been on so many drugs that it would probably kill another human being, and
Oh
he's
yeah.
managed to kick just about all of them. Uh,
Yeah, allegedly the
and
only thing he does now is I believe he says sometimes he'll drink a little bit, but he also smokes weed and does psychedelic mushrooms, and those are the only drugs he does.
all right,
Allegedly.
all right. I mean, that's a big achievement from
Yeah, which
heroin and crack and
exactly.
pills. So
And yeah,
take
eh,
take your victories when you can, kids.
it's better off doing the shit that grows out of the ground than the stuff that they have to make in a fucking laboratory. So,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Not saying that anyone should do drugs. We are not advisors or anything. You can't sue us. This isn't advice.
hugs, not
But
drugs.
yes, hogs, not drugs, everybody. But yeah, just what a wacky band. What a wacky everything. And they do put
What's
on they do put on a crazy show. I have yet to see them, but I do want to see them this time
Yeah, I have not
around.
seen them live
I
either.
think I think our friend Nick had invited me to a ministry show at one point because he had like a guest pass, and I think I was going through a rough time and I didn't go.
Yeah.
And I know that there was a War Beast show that he invited me to for the same reason. It was probably around the same time. It may have even been the same show,
Yeah.
and I didn't do it. And now I really wish that I had because I never got a chance to see Bruce Corbett live.
Yeah.
But I wish that I had done that. But yeah, I would love to see Ministry. I mean, also Al Jurgensen is 65 years old, which that's probably a miracle in itself.
Yeah. The amount of
So
drugs he's done.
yeah, so
Although you look at like the
I
Rolling
think I should
Stones and
probably
those
see
guys are
this.
still going. They're all
This is
80 years
true.
old.
This is true. Still just trying to like still just playing their songs however they can.
And they've probably done as much or more drugs than Al Jurgensen has.
Oh, they've definitely done a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. It's crazy, but
What was the first Ministry song you've ever heard?
uh the first ministry song I ever heard was probably Now. Um NOW, which is like a reversal of like which is like kind of an anagram for like New World Order.
Yeah, oh yeah, of
Um
course.
but that I heard that because it was on Tony Hawk's Underground 2. That was no, that was the first one that I remember, but that might not have been. I think the
Yeah.
first ministry song that I probably really heard was on one of the music choice channels.
Oh yeah.
It may have no. Yes, it was something I remember it now. It was Off of the Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste. I don't remember the exact song, but I remember seeing the artwork, which is just like an X-ray of the back of a skull,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting." And
Hmm.
then seeing of course, the tongue-in-cheek um, album title, and I thought it was really neat that, like, just as an idea. And then, of course, all of like the weird like things are like popping off. It was probably Thieves or So What,
Yeah.
but I remember thinking, "Wow, this is kind of weird, but I like it."
Yeah.
And then the first one that I really got into was Now,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
really just got started getting into ministry a lot more with like the anti-Bush stuff and digging back a little bit further into that. But it's so crazy because if you just listen to if you just if you listen to I've been working out to Ministry lately just for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Um, but and I have it on shuffle, so it goes from like stuff off of With Sympathy to like the newer stuff from The Last Supper or Hopium for the Masses or something, and it's just like this is just so night and day, and it's so crazy to see one after the other. Um, but what was the first Ministry song that you heard?
I can't actually remember the first one I ever heard, but I will say that a few years ago when I was just listening to like Spotify, like on like random shuffle for like, it was probably like Ramstein radio or KMFDM radio or something like that. And the song that kind of got me back into Ministry, uh, or like, to listen to them more often was Jesus Built My Hot Rod,
Mm.
which was also from Psalm 69, which is probably their most popular album. It's probably their most well-known album. Um, I think it had like the best chart position of all of Ministry's albums.
You might be right.
But yeah, that I was listening. It was probably KMFDM radio actually, because that's I would say, if you're gonna like listen to a band that's like very similar to Ministry, KMFDM is like right up there. And the Ministry song came on, and I was like, oh, whoa, that's interesting. Like it was like very different than like other bands that had come up so far. And then I looked, and I'm like, oh wait, it's Ministry, and I'm like, oh shit.
Hmm.
And yeah, and that kind of like got me into like listening to Ministry a little bit more, again. And then especially like in the last couple of weeks, just to get ready for the podcast, I've been listening to them a little bit, and on my way to work and stuff like that, just listening to various songs. And you know uh very much like I said, like right up kind of like my alley of like the type of music that like I like to listen to, especially when I'm like driving and I'm like alone in my car. Like I like to listen to like a lot of like industrial and like I said, I had mentioned KMFDM, Ramstein, that kind of music. It really like, especially like when I don't know, driving through the mountains and stuff. It just like I don't know. I like it somehow like makes me like feel, I don't know, at peace, I guess. I don't know. It's an interesting feeling.
I guess I could see that.
I don't know. It's
I
very
mean,
strange.
I live in the city, so I don't really, I don't know, but I guess the next time that I go up there, you'll have to just play some Ministry, and I'll see what you mean.
Yeah.
I guess as soon as you pick me up from the bus stop, just put on some Ministry, and then
Yeah.
like I'll see exactly what you mean. 'Cause
Yeah.
you'll probably pick me up at night,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I think we're all right. If we got anything else that we need to say,
No, it's a pretty good band. Like I
yeah,
said, Al Jurgensen, I'm not like 100% okay on. Like I don't know. He's just like, I don't know. See, I would talk to him though. I would like talk to him in real life and see
well,
how
yeah,
he
no,
is,
he's
because
a
I feel
cool
like,
guy to talk to. He's like,
yeah,
it is
I,
really interesting to talk with him,
I feel like I'm
but he
basing my
is,
like opinion
but
on him
he is
based on
kind of,
like stupid headlines and shit like that you read. Like he probably is just like a cool guy to hang out with in real life.
yeah, he is pretty cool. He is just like a little bit of a Luna guy, but
Yeah,
like, who cares? Aren't we all a little bit crazy?
yeah. Uh, but yeah, I would, if you haven't checked out Ministry, I would say definitely go check them out, especially if you're into like industrial, uh, or like synth, kind of like synth pop. If you want to listen to their early stuff.
Mm. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for taking the time to just listen to the show. We really appreciate each and every one of you, and I think it is a really fun time that we've had. Um, let us know which Ministry album or songs you like. Let us know how you got turned on to Ministry, and let us know like what exactly you enjoy about this band. And perhaps give your opinions on Al Jurgensen if you like in the comments, or if you want to email us at why does this exist show at gmail.com. That'd be great. Or if you want to pop into the Discord server and just tell us, then that'd be swell too. But Thank you all so much for being the people that you are and checking us out and having a fun time. We really appreciate this. We hope you learned something today. And if you didn't, well, we hope you found something nice to rot your brain to. This has
Yeah.
been Why Does This Exist? I've been Chris.
And I've been Rob.
And remember, question everything.